There are things that have puzzled scholars for decades, especially historians and archaeologists. What I'm talking about is the mystery surrounding the birth of many civilizations, particularly in Old Europe. The more scholars delve into their studies and look back in time, the harder it becomes to understand how everything began. In fact, going backward through history, it appears that many civilizations emerged and flourished in a very short time. A time so short that it's difficult to justify the sudden appearance of craftsmanship, writing, philosophy, and religion. As if everything had sprung from a single, specific origin, from a common civilization. More and more scholars are now hypothesizing the existence of an ancestral culture, which may have been the foundation for the development of many early communities. This culture would have then disappeared, leaving behind the civilizations we know today. For scholars, the terms civilization and culture have a very specific meaning. The term civilization comes from the Latin civitas, which can be translated as city. In fact, originally, humans all lived in similar ways. There were no real communities, and humanity lived a nomadic lifestyle, surviving through hunting and gathering. Then, with the emergence of the first cities, different ways of life began to develop. So, with the term civilization, scholars refer to the set of characteristics of a particular people. On the other hand, culture, according to scholars, refers to the set of material, social, and spiritual manifestations of a people or ethnic group, in relation to the various stages of an evolutionary process, different historical periods, or environmental conditions. In this way, scholars distinguish between the various populations that developed on the European continent. These are the populations we all know from school history books or from official documentaries we see on television. But meanwhile, research has never stopped. The techniques used to study humanity's past have become more and more refined, and new discoveries have emerged, surprising discoveries, and at times, uncomfortable ones. Uncomfortable, because when the truth shakes the certainties we are used to, we tend to hide it from ourselves. Nowadays, even people with little experience find it strange that some civilizations suddenly began to flourish. All of a sudden, human beings started making tools, began to recognize and cultivate plants, started to domesticate animals, began building structures, but above all, they began to write. And with writing, thought evolved, and philosophy was born. This sudden evolution of thought led humanity to realize that reality goes beyond what we can see. Humanity understood that our ordinary senses are not enough to deeply investigate nature and its implications. And from that moment on, we began to seek what escapes our sight. It's a debate that comes up from time to time, but it's hard not to notice how official science and the school system are too rigid, how they remain locked into predetermined frameworks, too rigid to truly delve into things. It's true that science has brought great progress to humanity, but it has become fossilized in its methods. Scientists feel satisfied with their successes and have stopped improving their research methods, as if those early successes had become a mental trap. And we are passing this mindset down to future generations, since it is the most widely used teaching method. But if this method doesn't answer all the questions, if this science raises more doubts than answers, then perhaps it's time to be brave and try new approaches. Perhaps it's time for new hypotheses. New hypotheses, because it is now increasingly clear that something yet to be explored is coming to us from the past. We have evidence that suggests there is much in our past that still eludes us. Even though the matter remains complicated. Despite the discovery of out-of-place artifacts, objects that could not have existed in the period in which they were supposedly made, mainstream science tends to reject the idea that an advanced civilization might have existed in ancient times. An advanced society that could be the origin of the civilizations we know today. A civilization, now disappeared, that by passing on its knowledge may have sparked the civilizations we study in school. However, talking about these out-of-place artifacts is often problematic. Mainstream scholars are highly critical, both about what these objects might actually be, and because, despite being studied, they offer little explanation about who created them and why. They may seem like a dead end, but many independent researchers have started to look elsewhere. Some of these scholars have turned to other sources, focusing particularly on ancient writings. These researchers believe that the ancient civilizations we know drew from the knowledge of this original civilization, and that they partially transcribed it. This originating civilization was certainly too advanced for our ancestors, who couldn't fully understand its knowledge but nonetheless tried to interpret and assimilate it. From this attempt, philosophy, religions, and the first laws were born, which were then written down to be more easily shared. For these independent scholars, all ancient texts contain traces of the knowledge of this so-called origin, as if the ancient writings held a code, as if, within them, burned the flame of a deeper truth. Mainstream scholars tend to be dismissive. When they speak of ancient writings, they often see them as nothing more than a simple evolution of thought or works of fiction. However, those who study them independently and with an open mind find traces of a deeper truth. Those free from academic constraints, by carefully selecting the most interesting parts of ancient texts, are able to reconstruct the hidden story within them. By carefully choosing the most significant parts of these ancient writings, we can learn more about those who may have been the origin of everything. By setting aside the mindset and prejudices we've always been taught, we can see in the philosophies and religions of our ancestors the presence of a much more advanced civilization. We discover that what our ancestors called angels or demons were very likely not just figments of imagination. In this video, we don't want to take a definitive stance. We're well aware that these are complex studies, and we want to avoid clashing with mainstream science, also because we're tired of hearing the same old criticisms. We simply want the freedom to explore our doubts and continue our research, without claiming to hold the absolute truth. So, in this video, you'll find only a summary of the conclusions we've reached so far. We'll avoid making definitive statements about exactly who the people were, or what they were called, those who influenced our ancestors, but we will be clear about what we've inferred from the ancient sources, without distinguishing between philosophical and religious texts. By reading ancient texts without prejudice, we can see that our ancestors lived alongside entities commonly referred to as deities, or beings derived from them. It feels natural to think that these were very likely an advanced civilization, one that lived in harmony with both technology and nature. A mysterious civilization that had not allowed itself to be overwhelmed by its advanced technology, and had not begun to destroy the natural world. This led their society to develop a refined way of living, where spirituality and civil coexistence formed the foundation of their legal system. A society with a deep ethical sense, where individuals were educated in contemplation and knowledge. A society in which people had created an earthly paradise, where it was possible to prosper and live in peace. Meanwhile, mainstream science prefers the theory that humanity, in a short span of time, went from living in cave communities to developing philosophy. For academics, the idea of an originating civilization that may have influenced our ancestors is deeply uncomfortable. We do have traces of it in written sources, but since it's difficult to identify exactly who these people were, their existence is usually denied. The academic method is very rigid. When it doesn't understand something, it tends to label it as a myth. When suspicious or unusual elements are found in ancient texts, they are often dismissed as works of fantasy or religious superstition. However, independent researchers are finding more and more answers that slowly begin to outline the presence, in our distant past, of a superior civilization, a civilization where people, technology, and nature coexisted. While mainstream science limits itself to what archaeology uncovers, many independent researchers delve deeper into ancient texts, both religious and philosophical. And those with an open mind clearly find traces of a refined and mature society, a society that had overcome materialist contradictions and had reached a higher form of thought. The most likely scenario is that our ancestors did not understand it. They were not sufficiently prepared, having only recently left behind the wild life of hunter-gatherers, and they interpreted it through the lens of their own limitations. Perhaps the worst part is that they reinterpreted it to such an extent that it was transformed into various religions. Our ancestors tried to bring it down to their level, but in doing so, it became a distortion of the concept of life and nature that the original civilization had. Even someone without expertise, when reading philosophical and religious texts, immediately notices the effort to envision a society where people live in peace and harmony, free from disease and suffering, and where people are no longer enslaved by work or money. Unfortunately, when we study history, we discover that things turned out quite differently. Human history is full of wars and economic crises, and our lives are dominated by work and money. Ancient texts often speak of spirituality and harmony, while we live in societies chasing the false well-being of consumerism. We live in societies where the wallet has replaced the soul. This shows that we have learned nothing from the original civilization. We copied their principles, but turned them into philosophy and religion. And in doing so, we have allowed our philosophies and religions to justify our mistakes and our crimes. We don't hide the fact that we know very little about this original civilization. They are referred to by many names: Atlanteans, Elohim, Anunnaki, but the truth is, we know very little about who they really were. We don't know whether they were a terrestrial or extraterrestrial race, nor do we know whether they truly disappeared, returned to their planet of origin, or are still here, perhaps secretly watching us. Some researchers even consider them dangerous, believing that members of this civilization may be working in the shadows and harming humanity. But this idea isn't very credible. Perhaps they fought some wars at the beginning of their history, but later they developed a refined way of life. They came to understand that happiness and the purpose of existence are not found in power or wealth, but in social peace and harmony of the soul. A pessimistic view of this original civilization comes to us from religious texts. Due to the spiritual immaturity of our ancestors, its higher way of thinking was misunderstood and distorted. In fact, the religious texts of our ancestors are often highly contradictory, as if they had not fully grasped the spiritual values they were referring to. And even though they are contradictory, these texts have ended up influencing our society, promising spiritual peace, but delivering a sad and empty reality. However, independent and open-minded researchers have begun to understand the foundation of our ancestors' writings. They have started to look for traces that could reveal the way of thinking to which those ancestors aspired, to find evidence of spiritual teachings that, unfortunately, they were not able to put into practice. And they have discovered that behind these spiritual teachings was a civilization waiting to be rediscovered, a civilization that we are not afraid to call the origin. The topics uncovered are varied, and some independent researchers have been struck by how often the figure of the circle appears and how much importance is given to it. This is a source of curiosity. The circle is seen as a perfect shape, where opposites meet, where matter and spirit are united, and find their harmony. Even the earth is spherical, it is our home. According to some researchers, the vehicles used by the beings of the original civilization were also spherical, possibly even capable of traveling among the stars. Perhaps even their robotic units were spherical, machines that acted as advisors throughout the day, even in political decisions. Their advanced technology was capable of independent thought, and could therefore support them even in daily life choices, rational yet intimate companions. These are fascinating hypotheses, which deserve further study, even at the cost of enduring the criticism and mockery of mainstream science. Those who seek the truth rise above such things, and don't waste time arguing. I realize the video is short, and that there's still much more to say, but my goal was simply to spark your interest, to to make you curious about certain topics. It was enough for me to open your mind a little and give you some food for thought. Maybe you already know a bit about the stories of lost civilizations, and maybe you even believe in them a little. If so, do you think they are enemies to us, or could they help us live better?